Alright, in this video we're going to look at how we find and write domain and range when we have a relation that's represented as a set or a table. First thing we need to do, just a quick refresher, domain is the set of all inputs, which typically, if we represent our relation as x and y, those are our x values in the relation. Range is the set of the outputs. Again, if we represent our relation as x's and y's, these are typically our y values in the relation. So the way we do these is basically both the same kind of process. In order to write the domain, we're going to write all the input values in increasing order. And an important note here, any values that appear multiple times in the original relation should only be written once in the set that we write to represent our domain. Same thing with the range, except now we're looking at the output values. So we're going to take all the output values and we're going to write them in increasing order. And again, any values that appear multiple times are only going to be written once in the set that we write to represent our range. So let's go ahead and look at this. First we'll look at some sets. We're going to identify the domain and the range of these relations and write them. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to identify the domain. And I'm going to clearly label it so that everybody knows this is the domain and not the range. And so in order to write this, I'm going to look at all of the inputs, the x coordinates in each of these points. So I look at these x values. I've got 3, -1, 2, -4. None of the values appear more than once. So I'm just going to write them in increasing order from smallest to biggest. The smallest one is -4. Oops. And then -1. And then 2, and then 3. And that is our domain. Then I'm going to write my range, my set that represents my range. And now in order to do that, I want to look at the outputs, all the y coordinates in these ordered pairs. And let's see, I've got 4, 7, 5, and 1. None of them repeat. So again, I'm just going to write each one time in order from smallest to biggest. The smallest one is 1, and 4, and 5, and then 7. And there's my domain and range for part A. For part B, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at the inputs, because they're going to determine my domain. And I've got, let's see, I've got 5, -1, and 5, and -1. Now each one of them appears multiple times. So since I have 2 occurrences of -1, I only need to write -1 once in my domain. Same thing for 5. 5 occurs multiple times, I only need to write it once in my domain. And so the domain of this set is -1 and 5. And then I'll do the same thing with the range. I'll look at the outputs. -2, 4, 3, and 3. Well, since 3 occurs twice, I'm only going to write it one time. And then I'm going to write these in order from smallest to biggest. The smallest is -2, then 3, then 4. And that's my range. That's how we're going to write the sets of the domain and range from a set of ordered pairs. Next, let's look at tables. It's the same idea, except the information is represented a little differently. So we've got, for this first function, for this first relation, pardon me, we've got this column of values as our inputs. Okay, none of them repeat, so when I write my domain, I'm just going to write them in order from smallest to biggest. Smallest one is -3, and 1, and 2 and 7 for my range. Do the same thing, except that we're going to look at the outputs. I'm looking at this column here. Again, none of them repeat, so I'm just going to write them in order from smallest to biggest. -4, -2, 1, and 5 is the range of that relation. Then I'll move on to part B, write my domain and my range. Start with my domain. I look at my input column, and I have 1, which repeats itself, so I'm only going to write that one time. And then I'm going to write these in order from smallest to biggest. 1, 3, 5. Do the same thing for the range, except I am now looking at my outputs. Now I have -2, which repeats itself, so I'm only going to write one -2 in my set. And so I write these from smallest to biggest. -2, 4, 6. And there's my range. And this is how we write domain and range from either a set of ordered pairs or a table of ordered pairs. That's the end of this video. See you next time.